Hello, my fellow communicators, and welcome to yet another amazing conversation episode. Today we're talking with Alex Jagiello, a CMM Fellow and recent graduate of the Columbia Teachers College Master's Program in Instructional Technology and Media. Join us as we discuss imagination, genuine inquiry, embodied realism, felt trust, seeing people through their patterns, and remembering that it's not as hard as we think it is to change our own patterns. Definitely some things to make you think in this episode. What I think you'll hear in this episode today is two people who both really resonate with the concepts of CMM, who find conversations about intentionality and communication to be invigorating and life-giving. For me, it has been so important to talk with people who share the same passion I do for communication. Today, I hope we can be those people for you. I think this is a cool one because we've had conversations with people who have been CMM practitioners for years and years and years. And we've had some conversations with people who weren't familiar with CMM at all. But Alex, like me, falls somewhere in between. We're both newer to the CMM community and world, so we both find ourselves in the space of still learning how to relate to CMM and bring it into our relationships and communication. I imagine that many of you find yourselves there too. So rest assured, you are in good company today. Okay, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories Lived, Stories Told. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest, Alexandra Jagiello. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Feels great to be here.
Good. Well, in the spirit of CMM and giving people the space to tell their stories, I'd love it if you could share with us what is the story that you are currently telling about yourself.
Well, interesting question. So I think the story that I'm currently telling myself is that I am a recent graduate of Teachers College. I just got my master's in instructional technology and media. So essentially that's sort of like hybrid research study experience about technology, communication, society, media, and like how they all sort of come together. But blending all of those things, you definitely need to have good communication. And I believe that my experience at CMM really shaped my, created a nice foundation to see the world through. And it applies in my academic life, in my professional life, in my personal life. And I've just had some experiences or opportunities in the past few months to sort of take what I learned in CMM and integrate it into these different areas of my life. Aside from that, I really enjoy making art. We're, going to probably talk about imagination. So I think that imagination to me is like the opportunity for creation in general, and whether that is through art, through activism, through creating new communication patterns, just imagining something that doesn't necessarily exist right now in this situation, but could.
That's really cool. I like that. I like the conversation that I've seen even before our conversation right now about, especially in circles of activism, where it all relates back to imagination, that every step in the right direction that's happened, every new idea that someone's had to make the world a better place has come from imagination because someone thought it up and had an original idea like that.
Yeah. And when you think about that momentum, it's very similar to the flow of an actual conversation, because it's always constantly building on itself, and it doesn't really end if you are maintaining contact with someone.
Yeah. Did you have interest in communication and even art as a form of communication from when you were little, or is that a more recent development for you?
I would say that's a more recent development. I lived in China for about a year. I came back. I came back to help take care of someone that was really important to me, who had he was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and it just wasn't looking good. So I eventually came back. I helped care for this person, and then eventually he passed away, and art became my outlet to process all of this. And it was when I first into collage making like in relation to him specifically. So like things that I might have found of his, or like, things that reminded me of him, whatever, I would use that to sort of like express my feelings towards the situation. And then it evolved into like just general self-expression, and using collage as a way to just, almost like as a metaphor for life, that's like layered, and sometimes not all of like not everything is like exposed. But if you like look hard enough, or you try hard enough, you can sort of figure it out, or not.
Right. That's a really beautiful way of describing that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm really curious about your academic journey too, because part of what's so interesting, or how I relate to CMM, is that it started out as this theory that exists in academia. I learned about it when I was studying my undergrad, and I have had conversations about it in the circles of academia. But what I really want to do is to bring CMM to everyone, because I think everyone deserves to have the language and the tools that it offers. And so I see that a little bit in your work too, which we can get to in a second. You just graduated. What has your academic journey been like?
It's been good. It's been a good experience. I started 2 years ago, and so we were online for the, first year or so. But the actual experience of being in an environment that is conducive to like critical thinking and exploring new topics, and like kind of the relationship between cognition and technology, and now integrating CMM into that, I think it's provided me with like a well-rounded perspective. But I would say that my experience and my education has led me to a point to think that although we are spending a lot, like although tech integration in education is, a huge area, and it's like ever expanding every day, I guess my focus is more in like the human development and social psychology, social constructivism. And I was able to kind of come to that realization by learning about how we can integrate technology into learning environments, and how technology can become, or is an effective tool for learning. And my interest sort of like split. And I was like, actually communication and how we communicate in social environments, and, what that can do for people. And then maybe applying that into like a work environment, like using my knowledge of these things to then be like, okay, we can improve communication on your team. Actually, I was listening to or watching a YouTube video yesterday about Barnett Pierce doing an interview, and he talked about the Public Conversations Project. And that actually seems, I looked into it, and it's under a different name now. I think it's called Alliance Group, but they did specifically this. They were basically conducting what he referred to as learnable, teachable, contagious communication patterns. And they would have conversations with people who are like on vastly different sides of the spectrum, like on ideas, like let's say, for example, like gun rights or gun control and abortion and these types of things. And they would essentially bring those people together to have conversations. And that was like super inspiring to me, because I was like, oh, wow, that's very much something I'm interested in, but maybe not so much like different sides of the spectrum. It's more like, how can we find the commonalities among our differences in everyday life? Right.
Not just on those huge political polarizing issues, but just in every area of our life. That's really interesting. Is what made you want to pursue your master's in the first place? Was it that desire just to be in a space where you can engage in critical thinking?
Well, when I lived in China, I started teaching there. I was teaching English at a primary school environment, and they had a lot of tech integration in their classroom. They used gamification. So I was able to see the ways in which like these little nuances in learning can really engage students, specifically children in these types of environments. And so while I was there, I was like, I would like to learn more about education specifically, and technology education, and maybe leadership. So I enrolled in a certificate program at Johns Hopkins. It was leadership and education technology. It was sort of just like very introductory stuff. Then eventually when I moved back home to the US, I essentially was provided with a pretty amazing opportunity to have like my master's degree education funded. And so it was up to me to find the right program for me. And I felt like so compelled to keep learning about the ways in which technology and communication overlap, because through those 9 months when I was in China, I was like communicating back and forth with people. We were using, like, that was like my main way of staying in touch with people. And then also I got to see technology integrated into education. And that was sort of my other interest area. And so I was able to really just blend the two through this program at TC.
I'm experiencing something similar right now. I'm in Spain right now, and I will be traveling for the next couple months. And I am generally someone that has kind of a negative outlook on technology and the ways that it's affected society, just the pull that like social media has on people and advertising and how it's kind of consumed everything and seems to be out of control. Even though I can see the positive elements in it, I'm also very aware of the negative. And so in my day-to-day life before I came to Spain, it is not something I would really rely on, especially to maintain my relationships. But now I have to rely on it. I have to use texting and calling and FaceTiming. And it's just different way to engage in relationship maintenance. And so I'm coming to appreciate it for that. But I'm just curious about your perspective of seeing it in a positive light in especially the education setting.
I think that used effectively, it has a lot of potential, but something that I've noticed is that there's a lot of like software programs that are coming out and they're like, do your class online with our program. But that's effective. You can like keep track of students' grades and all of these other like statistics and communication methods with like parents and stuff like that. But I don't know if it is that much better, frankly. Like I think that the really important aspect of education is to ensure that like the students are developing and that their like identity is being fostered and like their suitcase of potential is being unpacked. And like, I don't necessarily think that you need technology to do that. But aside from that, like learning through Zoom has been a really good experience, because otherwise I probably would have had to defer. I had the option to, right, to like defer for a year while education was happening only via Zoom and on other like online platforms, but I didn't. And I had the opportunity to engage, and we're having this conversation, right? We have the opportunity to communicate when you're in Spain and I'm in New York. And that's a really beautiful thing. I just don't want it to move too far into that direction where like we have less and less like human interaction and everything sort of moves into the internet space.
Right. Because it's the whole thing of, we're more connected than ever, but people feel so isolated and disconnected and lonely. But yeah, I think being able to do something like this is an undoubtedly positive thing. But I do see communication being important in that conversation, obviously, of just like what's the point where it starts taking away rather than adding value to, or rather than being effective. What was the name of the degree you just got in your master's program?
Instructional Technology and Media.
Okay. And you were at the Teachers College in Columbia?
Yeah, I was at Teachers College. Yeah.
So I know that your project that you did for the CMM Institute is about bringing communication and a lot of your different ideas that we'll get into later into like the workplace. Is that the direction that you're wanting to go in, or are you wanting to teach?
I think, that's sort of the crossroads I'm at right now, is thinking about wanting to go into workplace environments and improving communication. But then also like, I really enjoy facilitating and I enjoy contributing to conversations in classrooms and in learning environments. But I am optimistic that maybe the two can blend together somehow.
Absolutely.
That's my hope. But I'm taking a little break from the job search right now.
That seems fair.
Yeah. I'm working on a couple of projects. I'm working on like 2 contract projects, one with CUNY at York College, this project called Gen Cyber. We're creating a curriculum to essentially update teachers' understanding of New York State standards on cybersecurity, computer science, and digital literacy. So between the grades like 4th through 12th, there's going to be this new curriculum that's sort of like implemented. And so I've been helping on that project. And then another one is through RESI, which is Reimagining Education Summer Institute, and that's at Teachers College. And that institute hosts a 1-week summer camp for educators on creating equitable, the goal is to create like racially equitable education. And that starts in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so we've been working on, I've been like in the training to facilitate one of like the small group dialogue sessions. There's probably about 20 of them. And I did it last summer and it was a really great experience. And so I came back again this year and I'm looking forward to it. Both of those are going to happen in about mid-July.
Do you see the things that you learned from the time when you were a CMM fellow kind of bleeding into those areas?
Yeah, I think so. Probably mostly in giving space to hear and to like use like genuine inquiry to engage people, because sometimes in a facilitation setting, if you're the facilitator, like the goal is not to just be talking the whole time, obviously. Right. The goal is to engage with your participants, and they should be doing more of the talking than you. And so just approaching the situation with like an open mind, creating almost this intention of how you would like the experience to go. And then through that process, you can have that experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to go back a little bit, when did you first encounter CMM and learn about the CMM fellowships?
Last summer, I believe. Maybe, it's July or August or something. I tend to keep myself busy, and sometimes that's my downfall, but
right. Me too.
But I was like looking for something to continue the growth, like just something. I wanted to do something. I wanted to be either an internship or some type of experience where I'm like learning from people in addition to the classes that I'll be in. But it actually worked out really well because last fall I was doing an independent study. So CMM sort of became like my independent study, which was really great because I had so much time and resources to like put towards it. And it definitely fueled some of my other work as well. But yeah, so I guess it was about last summer, and I was really inspired by the prompt. I don't necessarily remember the exact, phrasing of it, but it was sort of like you have to like propose an idea of improving communication. And my idea happened to be about this board game that I was thinking about.
Sure.
Imagining, thank you. But it was called Collective Soul. And essentially the goal, or like, the idea behind this game is that you play this game and you get to like experience other people's perspectives in a game. And through that process, hopefully open up your awareness to the way that people that are different from you experience the world. And I was hoping that would be sort of like a bridge to quote Barnett Pierce again, learnable, teachable, contagious like behavior and patterns. Mm-hmm. So that was my project idea that I applied to the Learning Exchange Fellowship for. And then over time, throughout the actual experience, it completely changed because I was like, you know what? I'm like creating a solution for the need that I don't necessarily like have pinpointed yet.
Right.
Through the process, and like that's kind of where instructional design comes into play also, because in instructional design, you don't create the solution before you understand like the need.
Of course.
Right.
Right.
So I think with CMM, I was able to like look at my own life and see, okay, what are the needs that I see in my own life? Like, and one of them happened to just be like workplace communication. It was just could use improvement. So that's sort of where my interest arose.
Yeah.
When I first learned about it as a theory was in conversations with the advisors and while reading Making Social Worlds, like collectively. And we would read some chapters and then talk about it. And I just remember feeling so like energized after these conversations. And I was like, I need to be in these meetings. Like, this is like fueling my soul here. And it was just like such an inclusive space where everyone can just like, it's so experimental in a way. Also, it's like, you know, you just like say what's on your mind. And then that's that's great. Right. Like, everyone is just sharing their thoughts. And I really enjoyed being able to like ponder a little bit about these like theories, and then thinking about like practical application in daily life.
Yeah. So what I assume emerged from your project, I don't know if these ideas came from other places for you, but you talked about the ideas of imagination, genuine inquiry, and embodied realism. Can you explain what those are and how you kind of came to understand those ideas?
Yeah. Throughout the fellowship experience, I created this acronym because I was feeling a little bit lost, and I was evaluating my social interactions, and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm having these experiences with people, but I don't really enjoy, like, I'm seeking more. Like, there's maybe it's not the right fit, but like, there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just like it's not like we're not connecting. So anyway, I created this acronym to sort of help navigate my social experiences. It's MILC, meaningful, intelligent, loving connection. And that's sort of where the imagination came into play, because I was like, okay, how can I create these experiences that I want to have? And then embodied realism comes into play when you think about the acronym that you create for yourself, or MILC in this example. You become meaningful. You are meaningful. You are intelligent. You are loving. You are a connector. So you like take on the traits that you hope to experience. And then genuine inquiry, it sort of brings it full circle, because when you're like emanating these qualities, it's like you're like a magnet, right? You're like trying to attract that type of energy. And when you find someone that you are going to, you know, like you're having a conversation with someone, using genuine inquiry is a way to like determine if these things are happening, right? Like, are you experiencing a meaningful, intelligent, loving connection with this person? But you also have to like be active in the conversation. And by using genuine inquiry, you can like create opportunity for them to share. And, you know, one of the examples I talked about in my CMM presentation was this experience that I had when I went out to a bar I think it was like, it's kind of near Midtown. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But anyway, there was a lot of people. It was kind of like bi-level place. And they had this room with like a bunch of like lounge, like couches, like surrounding the perimeter of the room. And I was with a few friends from work, and we had just gotten off. I work at a restaurant. We went to this place, and we just wanted to like sit down and like hang out and just lounge. And I see a spot kind of near like the corner of the room, and there's 3 people sitting there like in a, you know, along the corner. And then there's a bit of open space. And so my friends and I just like went over there and sat down. And in that time with it, I would say maybe 5 to 10 minutes later, there was a guy sitting to my right. I was like closest to the other group. There's a guy sitting to my right, and he just like looks at me. He goes, "Don't you think it's kind of effed up that you just sat down here?" And I was just like, what? And
no reason.
And I was like, this is an opportunity. So in a way, this like imagination, genuine inquiry, embodied realism applies to like these practical situations. So when he approached me, when he like, just kind of like came at me with this like force, I like looked at him and I was like, what? And he repeated the question. And I looked at him and I was just like, I thought about it. And I used my imagination to think about what is an alternative situation, like what's an alternative scenario that can happen here besides him just getting more fueled up and mad. And
he's kind of leading you down this path to try to string you along to get you to react a certain way, but you're recognizing your own ability to not contribute to those same patterns.
Exactly. And I think pattern is the key word here, because in a lot of situations, that would be the expected pattern. So in that moment, I thought about it and I just took maybe like 15 seconds, just like thinking. And I was just like, I looked back at him and I was like, what if I do agree that it was messed up? Now what? So that's the genuine inquiry part coming into play. So it's like, so I agree with you. It was messed up that we sat here. Like what happens after that, right?
Yeah. What if I give you what you say you want?
Right. And so I look at him and he's like, he was red and like fuming. And then like his face just slowly like came back down to, a regular flush. Yeah. And he just like was like perplexed almost. He like went from like 100 to 0
right,
of just like neutrality. Like he was just like, it like neutralized the situation, because in a way I like saw him. I didn't like ignore him. I recognized his presence and I recognized his needs, and
you didn't dismiss his concern.
And his needs were far beyond me sitting there.
Right.
But it just so happened that I was the person that like received the projections, right? And it was actually a great experience, because then from there I was like, we can do this a lot more often. Like we can like change the patterns of communication that exist. So anyway, after I said that, he like looked at me and he was like, I would say thank you. I'd really like respect that. And I was like, okay, great. Like we're all good, And he sat there with his friends. I sat with my friends. Eventually they left and he like came up to us again and like shook all of our hands and was like, I'm really sorry about before. Like, thank you so much. And we all were just like, great. Like that was a good outcome to that situation.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say that's kind of how imagination, genuine inquiry, and embodied realism, how I thought about them, and then also how I apply them.
One of my favorite parts of CMM is the emphasis on the fact that we're active participants in the social worlds that we create. And I find it a very interesting conversation to hold that balance, especially in larger conversations around like social justice, of like, yes, you have personal power, and also there are like huge forces at play that are out of your control. And so I guess I'm still kind of meditating on that balance and finding what that relationship is. But to just talk about that personal power part, I think it's so important, because I see people relegate themselves to being an observer of like their own life and not remembering that they can change the pattern, or not knowing in the first place that they have that ability, because someone comes at them with, hey, don't you think it's messed up? You did this. And they just get strung along down that pattern without realizing or taking the moment to engage in using their imagination, to use genuine inquiry to get into embodied realism.
Yeah, I see that a lot too. And, sometimes you can look at someone else's problem and be like, wow, but if you just do this thing, then this pattern will break, or, you'll change the pattern. This negative behavior that you keep enforcing or enabling. You can enable yourself, you can enable someone else. But if you stop enabling them, that's changing the pattern. But a lot of times I believe that the thought process is like, well, I've been doing it for so long, so it's just easier to continue doing it instead of like doing something different. But the cool thing is that doing that thing that's different can take like 1 minute.
Right.
And like, then it's changed. It's
absolutely
changed. So like, yeah, it's, the risk is worth the reward, I'd say.
Right. Because it can be those smaller changes that build up over time to change the whole pattern.
Exactly. It's also that individual's responsibility to change the behavior. Like, it's almost, if we're thinking about it from like a collective perspective, we all have our roles almost. And that's why I think education is so important too, because education is the experience, the opportunity for people to like embody their potential and like find their path almost like in society.
Okay, what is felt trust?
Felt trust is the best feeling ever. Felt trust is when there's a feeling associated with knowing that you're autonomous. It's a reciprocal relationship between you and someone else, that you trust them and they trust you, and you feel that, and you can actually like perform better. So I'm thinking about felt trust in like a work environment specifically. And there's research on felt trust and how when employees feel felt trust from their supervisors, they actually like have increased performance, increased motivation, autonomy, and then like retention as well. So felt trust is, I guess, just, well, it starts with the ability to communicate with each other and to articulate like positive reinforcement and acknowledgement and vulnerability. And kind of, I mean, as a supervisor, you sort of have to create that space. You have to lead by example. You should be able to do all of those things in order to create that experience for your employee to also be able to share.
What I appreciate about CMM is that it seems to have value in like my own personal life and experiences, but then also in like a professional setting, where all these different kind of power dynamics are at play. And based on what you're saying, it seems like you maybe see that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe felt trust in a personal situation it's different. It's like a different set of criteria to feel. But I think that's where meaningful, intelligent, loving connection comes in.
Right.
And I realized recently development in meaningful, intelligent, loving connection. My intention was like, I want to have these types of experiences, meaningful, intelligent, loving connections. And then once I have them, I get to like, essentially it's like a barometer. It's like a, rubric. Like, can I experience all four? Amazing. If not, like a few of them is good. And then I realized afterwards, like months later, I had this really meaningful, intelligent, loving conversation. And it was so sad. Like it was a very sad, it allowed me to like release a lot of stuff that I've been like, harboring. And I was like, oh, wow, meaningful, intelligent, loving connection. Like it's not always like a happy experience, but that's why it's meaningful. And, that it goes deep, it goes beneath the surface, and beneath the surface, there's some like things there that people need to be able to talk about, even if they aren't happy. So I think if that experience happens, like that's also an example of felt trust.
Yeah. I think that's an incredible way to frame things, because something I think about in my own life is even on a very, very simple scale. If someone's like, oh, how are you? And I'm like, I'm good. I really try not to use good because it's such a vague word. And so I want to use words like meaningful, because maybe I did have a really hard conversation that was really emotional and really exhausting almost even. And it made me have to think about things in a new way. And so I might not say, oh, that was a really good conversation, but maybe it was really meaningful. And so it has value in these more nuanced ways. And I think that is helpful for giving people that kind of language to say, okay, what you want is actually not a quote unquote good conversation. So come up with your own acronym like MILC. What are you looking for in conversations? Because then it gives people the ability to, imagine, say, this is what I want, and then go towards it. Because it's hard. I feel like it's hard to embody, good, because what is that?
Right. And I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the patterns that we can create for ourselves in like little moments, which is creating your own acronym, right? Like setting the intention of the types of social experiences that you want or the type of life that you want. And I actually did this activity with my friends at another bar. And, it was good because we all had different ones. We all had like different acronyms, and everyone has like a different interest area or, strength that they would like, improve upon. And I realized also, like, after implementing this in practice in my own life, I can be in social situations and like have a lot less anxiety about being in a social situation that maybe I'm with people I'm not familiar with, because I can just like sit back and like be assured that it's not personal. If someone's not talking to me, it's not because like I did something wrong. It's like everyone's going through the same thing. Like we're all like doing the best we can with the resources that we have. And if you're not the most like outgoing person, like that's cool. Just like you're better with like one-on-one. Me too.
Yes.
So like I prefer to like sit and like talk to one person, like 2 people max. More than that.
Right. Me too.
Like, more than that, I'm just going to sit here and listen, because I'm not always the one to like initiate conversations in the groups, but that was something that I realized and like I'm okay with, and I know where my comfort zone is in that regard, but I still like push myself and challenge my own comfort zone. But it's comfortable to be able to like think about these types of interactions that you want and then act accordingly.
Yeah. Based on your project and everything that we've talked about so far, I see a big passion around the creation of community and maybe bringing people together that have different opinions or different experiences. What role do you see the principles of CMM having in that?
I guess CMM, with the theory of CMM, we can build bridges among social worlds and recognize that we all come from different social worlds. And then like think about that in like a positive way and be like, well, everyone has different perspectives, and I want to, we want to share those perspectives. We want to make sure that like differences of opinions and experiences are heard and represented. I guess one example of this that I've done in my own life is creating this social art initiative called the Art Exchange. And in the Art Exchange, people sign up, from all over the country, basically. And they give me a little blurb about themselves, a summary, and their interests, what kind of art they make, who are they, like what type of, connection do they want to have, whether like, a digital exchange or like a mailed like art piece. But anyway, the point is that these people get to work on their skills and then also like share something about themselves. And I connect them with another person, and that becomes their art pen pal. And so for a month, each person like works on a project that's either like an introduction of themselves, or it's like something that they've read about their partner having an interest in, and like creating something for them specifically. And they have the option, a lot of people make stuff based on the other person's interests, which I find very cool. But either way, I'm more of the person's like, this is me, like, here's an introduction of me. But anyway, so that's been a great experience, because in a way, it's like bringing people together who may never have had the chance to interact or learn about someone else.
Absolutely. Well, my final question for you is that since CMM has the ultimate goal of creating better social worlds, what is a better social world to you, and how are you trying to create that?
A better social world is a world where fundamental human rights includes equitable education, equitable, efficient education, access to the resources that we need to like fuel our, I want to say souls, but like,
sure,
you know, like honestly, like to me, what is most important is like this awareness of our collective responsibility for each other, and like acting or, you know, living your life to ensure that like you are helping people, right? Like helping as many people as you can. So like my idea of how I'm trying to contribute to this goal is by improving communication in different environments.
Wow, I loved that conversation, and I really hope you found some meaning in it as well. I think this conversation has left us with a lot to think about, so today, our next right turn is going to be thinking. Let whatever stuck out to you in today's episode stay with you a little longer. One thing I'm taking away from this conversation is how Alex spoke about MILC conversations, her acronym, Meaningful, Intelligent, Loving Connection, and about what she wanted out of conversations. Actively figuring out how to make them happen, and also being understanding of herself and others when those kinds of interactions didn't happen. For me, MILC really aligns with the kinds of interactions I want to have, but I wonder what your acronym would be. Spend some time thinking about it. What do you want out of your interactions and relationships? What are you doing to make that happen? I felt that Alex did a really good job of being able to articulate this idea that we're starting to explore in this podcast, which is taking all of this newfound knowledge and actually letting it transform our actions, or what Alex described as moving from imagination to embodiment. So it's good to remember we're all on this journey of moving from imagination to embodiment. We are all always on that journey. As always, I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Lived, Stories Told. I'll see you next week.